Good evening, and welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, and to the 8th season of the Artisan Lectures. I'm Karen Taylor, Program Director of the General Society. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. We'd also like to thank for this evening Polly Guerin, who suggested tonight's speaker. So thank you very much, Polly. The General Society was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of the City of New York, artisans who represented 22 different trades. This included carpenters, blacksmiths, silversmiths, goldsmiths, tailors, saddlers, and really reflected the diversity of New York City at that time. Today, our 233-year-old organization continues to serve the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the library, of course, which you're in this evening, and our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of which the Artisan series is, of course, part of. And finally, the John M. Mossman Lock Collection, which you are more than welcome to visit after tonight's program. You will find additional information on the General Society on the blue and white postcard on your seat. Our speaker this evening is David F. Gibson, principal of DF Gibson Architects. And he is going to this evening describe the story behind the restoration of one of New York City's most significant landmark buildings, the South Bronx Job Corps Center. And this year, in fact, only on Tuesday, the New York Landmarks Conservancy was pleased to award a 2018 Lucy G. Moses Award, its highest honor, to this restoration project. So really congratulations to David for that. David Gibson is the founder and president of DF Gibson Architects, and is an award-winning architect with over 40 years' experience in architectural design, master planning, historic preservation, and sustainable design services. Historic preservation work includes many notable projects, which are, some of them, just to name a few, the Historic Structures Survey and Master Plan for Delaware and Raritan Canal, Snug Harbor Cultural Center in Staten Island, Thomas Edison State College in Trenton, Lambert Castle in Paterson, and Ebart Hall in New York. I'm very pleased to now introduce to you David Gibson.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. The inevitable timer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor to be asked to present this lecture to the General Society, and I have particularly focused it and tailored it because the General Society of Tradesmen and Mechanics is the very subject of the entire lecture. I will talk about the history of the architecture only briefly. More information you want, we'll do it in Q&A. But this is a lecture about a very large building construction project, the Bronx Job Corps Training Center, which was constructed in 1905 and 1908 as the Messiah Home for Children. It was conceived by Henry H. Rogers, who was one of the businessmen and industrialists involved in the creation of Standard Oil Company with, of course, John D. Rockefeller Sr. So Mr. Rogers had considerable means, which is why the building that he constructed is as elaborate as it is. It was built, as I said, in 1905 to 1908, conceived by Mr. Rogers, designed by eminent Boston architects Charles Brigham, who was among the world's experts in Elizabethan Revival and Gothic Revival architecture and in Jacobean Revival, and coined the term Jacobean to combine those two monarchs. The building that he built, as you can see, is unbelievably ornate, made of brick, limestone, terracotta, slate, copper, dormers, cupolas, finials, pendants, recessed windows with transoms, etc., etc. It is, I would say, probably the best built building of its type in our fair city, if not the whole country, simply because the man who built it basically had pretty near unlimited funds with which to put up his and his wife's dream. And so, saying that, I won't say any more about the building except it served as the Messiah home until it was sold to the Salvation Army, after which it was taken over by the city of New York and purchased and turned over to the Job Corps Center program during the War on Poverty and President Johnson's activities. That's really all I'm going to say about the history of the building. There is much more to be written and much more interesting things to be known, but this lecture is about the building itself. As you can see, it is an unbelievably ornamental building. It is an extremely substantial building. All of the walls of the tower and of the exterior of the building are 3 feet thick. The towers are 60, 80 feet high. It was in pretty difficult shape when we found it. The rear of the building is just as ornate as the front. It's not one of those you go round the back and everything gets plain. The roof is a typical Elizabethan Revival roof, hugely steep, has been changed here to shingles, asphalt shingles, wrongly. We'll talk about that in a moment, but you can see the level of complexity of the whole exterior of the building, and especially... So, the building, as you can see, is an extremely complicated... This is one of the many working drawings we did to restore the building, because we did a complete restoration of all exterior masonry in the building. The brick, the terracotta, the limestone, the pendants, the finials, everything in the exterior and all pointing was replaced. We also replaced the boiler system, the chiller system, the HVAC system, so we are truly the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen. Everyone, Victoria is smiling, everyone is in this lecture. And so we are very proud of that. And we've specifically tailored it for that purpose. We found the building generally in this condition. All of the exterior masonry had salt damage, had been not maintained for quite a long time, as is sometimes the case with public buildings. And so our goal was to change this appearance to this appearance, and we're showing you the differences to make the building look like it looked when it was first opened, and to restore it to the Secretary of the Interior standards, because it is a National Historic Landmark that is required, and we did it with a single exception, which we'll talk about in a minute. All of the exterior surfaces, as I said, of the building have been repointed, have been repaired, and have been replaced or or I'll get into a very specific way we decided to repair the building in the middle, but all are at this level of quality. So here is the base of the building. As you can see, it is made of granite, and it has been repointed, and this is illustrative of our attitude with respect to all of the exterior surfaces of the historic building. They all look new, they all look fresh, and they're designed to last another 100 years because, as I said, the building was built and opened in 1908, and so now it's entering its second century of life. It made it through the first century pretty fine. There's no reason it can't make it to another one. This is one of the elevation drawings that our firm did, in which we, where's the pointer? In which we rebuilt this gable end from this level all the way up to the top of the roof. This is just one example of one of the most drastic changes that we made in the building, and now we're going to go through that. Can maybe move on to this slide? Okay, we begin with the finial on that corner, showing you the finial with the cuts that are made in the limestone in order to make it able to be repointed. As you can see, that finial is in excellent condition and does not need to be removed and rebuilt. Next. This is included just to show you the level of complexity of the roofing elements and all of the various walls and parapets and ornament and so on. That is an extremely complicated building. Next. Okay, so as we moved down the building and began our research, you can see we began removing bricks, exposing failures in the wall. The wall had buckled outward and needed to be repaired. There was ornament which was loose and about to collapse, and so we did not remove it from the scaffold because it was 60 feet in the air and weighed, as you can see, several hundred pounds. So it was left there. The entire gable end, the triangle that was there, you are able to see, all of the brick was removed from that. All of the steel that supported it was removed. You can see the stretchers setting up and the angles on the steel on the angles of the roof. There is looking up at the roof with the new steel in place, and the stretcher, the suspension things are still there from which the steel was suspended that supported this 35-foot high brick wall that was removed. Here's down the wall another 15 or 20 feet. You're able to see one of the steel beams that had failed, but not completely, so it was left partially in place, but you can see all of the brickwork was removed. The old steel supporting previously the brickwork, which was failing, the wall was buckling out and would have ultimately failed if we had left it in place. And you will see the lintels and how enormous the lintels are that span the windows. They are still sitting on the portions of the brick wall which are still intact, but you can just see the amount of demolition which we did in removing that wall was considerable. Here is the beam that we had reconditioned to remain in place. And here is the steel that we have just put in place to suspend from the steel above, from which the window mullions are suspended. Here's a detail of how that works, where the lintels are resting against the brick which was remaining in place. As you can see, this is a fairly severe change and very complicated work. This threaded rod will suspend the steel that you see there from the new steel above. There is the new steel bolted into place, securing the mullions in the building. And each mullion that had to be resecured is done in this way. We ran into these kinds of situations throughout the demolition and replacement. As you can see, all of these beams that were this severely rusted could not bear any weight, and all of them had to be removed down to a distance. I'm just guessing this, but it's 30, 35 feet from the pinnacle at the top. So here is a beam that you see that was in the angle of the building, and that one was able to be secured with a new plate, which we had our engineers create and weld it on. Why is this not? And weld it on the steel. There, as we just showed you. So welding that on the steel saved removing and replacing an immense piece of steel. And I don't know why it keeps going back. But, okay, anyway, so you're getting a picture for how severe some of this damage was and how much we did to re-support it. Here is the brick coming up from the lintel, which you saw in place. The new steel, it just keeps going back to that. Yeah. Should I use this?
I don't know why.
I don't either. Okay, so there's the new piece of steel just sitting there with the masonry rising around it. Here is the masonry continue to rise around it with the ornament that was lying down on the scaffolding there in place. We are now restoring the wall to its condition. Here the wall rises higher. Still, here's an example of the curved limestone joining the ornament that you saw lying on the deck, and this is in place on top of this steel. So you see we're now rebuilding the wall. This ornament is in place. Here is the brick rising with another piece of steel from which all this is, as you can see, this is really quite severe a replacement, but when it is finished, you cannot tell we were there. There is a finished wall. Notice the brick has been curved and cut so it fits exactly as it was. Here is the finial as you saw it originally, and that's now finished, that north build region. Okay, now, can I just go? Yeah. Okay, so many things in the building were damaged in this minor way. And they were chips, they were little broken pieces of stone. We decided to treat these things like teeth, filling the teeth and using dental scaled bigger equipment to cut the stone out and leave it in place, thus removing enormous amounts of stone, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on replacement, and actually leaving more original fabric within the building. So here are workers, of which there were dozens, putting the limestone and the epoxy mortar back in place, matching the color, which we'll talk about. You see here's a color match of one of the things. We changed the method and stopped taking out big pieces of limestone. At this point, Cathedral Stone, the company that did St. John the Divine and the Washington National Cathedral, was teaching at St. John the Divine when I was at Columbia. I met them. I called them back. They came. They were hired to work on this project. And this is an example of some of their work. You can see this is a patched lintel, and this lintel patched, you cannot tell where the damage was and where the inclusion was that you saw previously. So we got quite good. This thing has been completely replicated, this little thing, in a mold based on what we found there. So again, we didn't have to dig out something and remove it and replace it, but whether we replaced it in situ. And here's an example of a patch where the mortar did not match the stone. And so I'm showing you this to point out that yes, this did happen. But most of the time, the kind of masonry work we were able to effect ended up looking like this. Here is a new window, a completely newly done masonry repair. Here's a larger whole window so that you're able to see the entire assembly and recognize that the mortar and the stone, the limestone and the terracotta all match. We were able, here's another of the same thing. We were able to get extraordinary matching of these limestone pieces. Now, also, anybody with Guastavino vaulting in their building has to brag that I have Guastavino vaulting in my building. And so here is some underneath a balcony. It was in excellent shape, as Guastavino vaulting most frequently is. And so we did very little work on it, but I just include it to show you the beauty of it, how it fits in and is very much in sympathy with and in support of the aesthetic of the Elizabethan vaulting of the building. This building is about roofs. Huge, tall roofs that are 2 stories high, about 11 degrees and impossible to go up and down without a pulley. And I am showing you this picture so that you can see the complexity of the roof and the enormous size of the roof. And I'm all showing you this slide so you can see these chimneys, which you'll see later, that are about 12 to 15 feet high, have steel straps holding the chimney to vertical steel rods within them, without which the chimneys still would not be on the building. Because this is at the top of Fordham Hill, the wind speed going over this roof is frequently 70 and 80 and 90 miles or 100 miles per hour. So the management of the center was able to secure this and other things in the building over many, many, many years in order to avoid damage to the structure. You'll see how we dealt with that. Here are typical dormers. As you can see, we reclad the dormers. Here we go again. We reclad the dormers. Wait. I'm going. Yeah. Yeah. We reclad the dormers. You can see the new pieces. We rebuilt them and we reset them on the roof. The roof has still not, in this photograph, been replaced. The dormers are extremely complicated, and when the roof, which was in this terrible condition, you can imagine the leaks that occurred with this covering much. All of the roof was replaced, as you see here, with new plywood and new roofing material. All of the insulation and flashing was properly done with copper insulation, as you can see, and thermal insulation to bring the building up to present energy code. Slate was used to recover the roof. And I have a piece of this slate because we did something quite different here. The specifications originally called for us to use real slate covering this enormous roof, and the real slate was going to look like this with edging pieces. But if we so we decided and made a petition to the government that we should use plastic epoxy slate. First time we used non-secretary of the interior material. Why? Because we did a test, and when a bucket hits this, it doesn't shatter. The roof that was put on the building was several $100,000. So I'm going to show you this. This is one of the first times. Sorry, this is one of the first times that the government permitted a variation of the Secretary of Interior standards in a National Historic Landmark. But the reason for doing so was incredibly logical, right? Okay, so here is the man going up and down. This is how the roof, all of this roofing had to be applied by gentlemen in harnesses like that. Here's the roof going on with the same pieces. Please pass this around and examine it, and examine it during the reception. You can see the roof being applied to this. Here are the dormers as that roof is being prepared to be removed, and here is a piece of roof between two dormers to explain to you the enormous complexity of having to have vertical roof members, angled roof members, snow guards, and all of this stuff. This, by the way, the white stuff is the snow. So we were working on the roof in the snow, and this job went through the winter, and you can see the flashing. Everything is being done according to, here is the finished roof, which you cannot tell is not a real slate roof, I would suggest. Look at the piece and the edging. It's thick, it has a shadow line, it's really, we found a wonderful modern product to take the place of a very difficult one. Now we have cupolas, and we have buckets that knock off tops of cupolas, and that occurs throughout the building. And so what do you do when you lose one? Well, you go in a shop and make another one, because you have one next door, and you take it off, and you measure it, and do drawings, and you replace it in kind with another copper element. Here's one in place, completed, reattached to the limestone base. Here's the inside, which was the Pigeon Grand Hyatt Hotel. I tell you, I mean, this thing, you can see, it's 20 feet high. The number of pigeons, I won't get into that, but all of that was removed, as you can see. It was rebuilt and replaced, and the total tower below it, which goes down probably another 40 or 50 feet, all was rebuilt, cleaned out. The Grand Hyatt was removed, the room accommodations for the pigeons, and this has all been returned to normal and sealed. All of the copper has been reattached to the limestone, and the limestone has been refinished. We left the patina, the green, on the limestone because that's the patina. This building is 100 years old plus another. I mean, this building has been there a long time. It should have patina. It should not be brand new, clean building to the team. So we left this. We did take much of it off, but you can see we left it on the quatrefoils. We left it on much of the ornament. We believe it adds to the flavor. Here is the tower now completed. The downward shot you saw is in the base of the tower. The upward shot is looking up to the top of the new cupola. Here's a pair of them, one new, one old. When the new one gets a chance, we did some quenching of it. It will turn green and darken. over time. And so when all of this is a now newly restored gable end, please note the color of the mortar, the color of the limestone, the color, all of this has been repointed and rebuilt. And I personally think that this speaks to the company of Cathedral Stone's skill in making these epoxy mortars in a modern way to reseal the building and to do a good job with the idea that they're filling teeth, not putting in implants. This is a fresh look at a way to restore buildings, and we're very proud that we were involved in that. The other limestone pieces, some of which were in good condition, most of which were in good condition, a few of which weren't, those things that were in that condition were rebuilt out of this new mastic. It looks like putty, and you form it into a mold which has been made from the pieces that have been removed. And so all of the things of this sort, which frequently required removal of all of this limestone, and you can imagine the difference in the cost to the client of this involved. Now we're on to the chimneys. Man, did this building have chimneys. This is a chimney pot chimney with 3 elements. We took the chimney pots away down to the shaft that goes all the way down into the building and reconnected it to the boiler, which had been changed to a metal duct on the outside. We took that away. So we restored this chimney to its normal function. We rebuilt the chimney, which had to be taken down, you'll see in a moment, about 12 or 14 feet. Here is the chimney going to the main boiler, which goes all the way down from the very top of the building to the boiler room in the sub-basement. It's, I would imagine, about 80 feet, this thing. This was made of terracotta and made of mortar, and there is a new German system called Furenflex, where you take a long piece of epoxy, long meaning 100 feet, and you heat it up and pull it up in this chimney. Then you apply air pressure to this membrane, which causes it to expand and stick to the masonry around it and restore a chimney that has been dysfunctional for probably 40 or 50 years and get rid of a hideous metal rusted duct on the outside of the building. This is the kind, I think, of preservation care that we wish to exercise on the building. And by the way, it was much cheaper to do that, was it not, than to go hack your way down through the building and build a new chimney, right? So we were really being conservators of the historic fabric. Here is one of the masonry chimneys, which was ventilating water heaters, the air for which the exhaust temperature was much lower, so we did not put all of the mortar back because there was no necessity, but we restored every single chimney in the building to its use. Do you understand that those chimneys are probably 12 or 14, 15 feet high as they sit on the roof? They were, you saw them torn down almost to the roof level. This was a project of severe intervention, but it was also one of enormous financial success because it saved huge amounts of money. You can imagine having that restored as opposed to that being rebuilt from scratch. It was not. It was taken down and put back same brick. Okay, the pair of them are there. Here are the other chimney. There are 3 types of chimneys. One are boiler chimneys, that one. The second one are chimney pot chimneys, which ventilated fireplaces. Each of them had 3 elements and a large chamber below, as you see there. Each of them had a number of chimney pots, including this elaborate base, which was removed and rebuilt. and reapplied to the top of the brick, which is below. Then here come the chimney pots. Each one of these chimney pots weighs about 500 pounds and is about this high. There are 3 of them that stack one upon the other. Here are the workers with the cranes lifting. This entire building was scaffolded for many, many months with cranes all around to lift these huge, heavy pieces up and stack them back up. As you can see, they're putting it together there. And when finished, the top goes on. The chimney works. It has ventilation to provide. It looks like it looked the day it was built. It's made out of epoxy, Portland, and concrete, cementous material. It's done in a factory. It's called precast concrete cylinders. And when it's finished, it looks like this on the top, exactly from the molds that were made from the originals, which were removed and sent to the shop, and it looks like that when it's standing on the side of on the top of the building. So, you know, you almost can't tell, I'm very proud to say, that we were there, but we were, because it, as you can see, it looks much different than it did. These things are quite magnificent, aren't they? I mean, okay. There are numbers of them. There is another 2-element chimney that ventilates kitchens and lower things with these tops that go on the chimney pieces. The tops are the round pieces that are sitting on. All of that is made of precast concrete, lifted with a crane up and set by masons. All of the bases have been rebuilt and cleaned and our original material, and there is what a completed chimney looks like. I just love to point out that here's the chimney. The element of the chimney goes through here and down, right? And the fireplace is down here, and you would ask, why do people do that? And the answer they give you in the text is because we can. Okay, so this is the rear of the building showing the air conditioning system. There's David looking at the old, dark, stained pieces that are held together. And here are the new ones, as you can see here, with what I've just described. In addition to this, several of the finials on the tower, which are cantilevered, which means they're mounted on the outside of the outside wall, have been destroyed by things flying through the air. And so what we did is we had our artisans redraw the pieces that were missing, send wood to the wood, and make new pieces to go on top of the original ones and mount them on top of the building. So what have we done? We've restored those finials that were gone for the last 50 or so years. And look what we've made. We've made a building that looks finished with the finials on top of the tower. We did it in a woodworking shop. You can't tell from the ground that it's new. And it's made of precast concrete. And there are multiple of these things that match the other pieces in color correctly. Thus, you can see here is one and there is one. Here's another. I need to get it stuck.
Don't clutch the buttons
Okay.
On there and at the same time.
And there's another with 4 of them. You can see them. There are 4 of them on there. So we restored these towers pretty much to what they looked like when this building was opened 100 and some odd years ago, and did it with aplomb and saved a great deal of money doing it. Gargoyles and guardians. Guardians are these plaques. Here's Jim Stoney, our structural inspector, and another technician. We have these sorts of ornaments. You're going to like this one. We have little ladies on either side of every window you can possibly imagine, a lion or 2 running around on the tower, and more faces than you can imagine. 24 actually, running around the building. Some nurses are not so happy actually. It sort of looks like, you know, she's had a bad day. Others are very happy and singing God's praises, it looks like. Others are not quite sure what they're doing. But anyway, all of them are extremely funny, extremely original, and ornament this building. And those did not need to be removed from the building. We simply cleaned them with soap and water in situ as they were. Another lady with a bad day, looks like, huh? And one of the kings. A salamander gargoyle, huh? This little guy had to be partly rebuilt. From where he sits, you cannot tell. He's really kind of like cranky at the bottom. But I'm showing you all of these things just so you know how much ornament this building contains. Now, Mechanics and Tradesmen is the title of this society, and here's the mechanics piece, a 250-ton new air conditioning system that cools the building, a building management automated computer-controlled internet-connected building management system, 2 pumping systems for chilled water and hot water to send this water through the building to the air handling units in the attic and the basement. Those are boilers. There are 5 of them. We had to get them in a boiler room through the windows and doors, which was a bit of a struggle, but we managed it. They're made in Germany. They're high performance. They're digitized. And there are, as I said, 5 stacked 2 high. So we got very creative in our use of space, but did manage to get all the equipment in the building. Here are the air handling units in the attic. And in closing, I simply say, this is one of the most magnificent Elizabethan Jacobean Gothic Revival buildings, I would say, in probably, well, let's all of us go out and see if you can find one that's more ornate, has more fenestrations and more pendants and more finials. You certainly will not find one in better condition than this, because this building is expected to stand for another 100 years, and it certainly might. It is, I think you would admit, one of the most magnificent buildings we've ever seen. And it was, for me and for my team, a thorough pleasure to do this, and a thorough pleasure to present it to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen today. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get to the Q&A section, just acknowledge that it is being recorded, so please wait for the microphone to get to you.
Hello, my name is Inez Leon, and you stated before that you were cleaning the stone with soap and water. Was that the way that the stains were cleaned throughout the entire building?
Yes. We did not use any toxic, any non-sustainable materials. And I have found out, I've been cleaning stone now, as people introduced me, said, for 40 years. I find good old soap and water, maybe with a little detergent, but generally not, the best way with elbow grease to clean grease off a stone, because the grease that's on the stone is coming, you know, it's just dirt, and it does not need all of these high-powered toxic things to make it clean. You can see the building is clean. Yes, ma'am.
And the next, the next piece is you used coppersmiths to do the restoration of pieces that were missing.
We did, yes.
Were there anyone in New York, or you had to go out of state?
No, we were all in New York.
Great.
And, well, in New Jersey. There's the big shops in New Jersey that have their retail outlets in Manhattan.
Okay.
And they're also up in the Bronx and elsewhere, too.
Great.
Because they're factories, and they, you know.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Two questions. First of all, why do the winds blow off the roof that you said 70, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour? That's number one. And number two, why did the original building have so many failures with the walls, the roofs? Was it poorly made, or just a lot of time went by? So those are two questions.
Well, the question number one is that was the building's original design. Its original design was extremely complicated and involved all those materials, and so those materials have been there almost from the beginning. Why does the wind blow at 70 miles an hour across the top of Fordham Hill? I couldn't tell you. All I know is the roof has blown off of that building a number of times, and you saw part of it that was underneath the tarpaulin when we arrived 5, 6 years ago. So it's a very, very windy site, and we live, I think we know now, in a very, very windy city. And we need wind protection for things, which we are now finding ourselves getting from our contractors in new roofing materials. That plastic roofing is 3 times stronger than a slate shutter that could be fractured by a flying object that would weigh less than 10 pounds probably. So I think we're all getting smart about this wind business.
So it is very curious that, you know, apparently there's no reason. Is it a specific area of the world where wind just blows at such high rates? Or is it the geometry of the roof creates certain vortexes? You have no idea?
Well, I have no, you know, the roof is what the architect expected it to be, which is this very steep and beautiful, but difficult roof. And I think we don't use them that much anymore. You notice, many roofs are flat. They're very shallow. But you know what? A Gothic Revival Elizabethan building is a Gothic Revival Elizabethan building, and it needs a roof that looks like that. Yes, sir.
Two questions. How long did the restoration take from start to finish, and what was the most difficult part of the restoration on the exterior facade of the building?
Oh, boy. Well, the construction period was 3.5, almost 4 years. And it was long because it kept starting and stopping. And if you remember what the weather's been like in the last 4 years, I mean, you can't go up on one roof when you've got 4 inches of snow on it. I mean, I don't go on the scaffold when there's 4 inches of snow because I'm scared to death. Okay? That's number one. The second question was the most difficult thing. I think the most difficult thing really is coordinating that many, forgive me, tradesmen who worked on the job, because I'm telling you, Victoria, we had every tradesman you've got. I mean, we had copper, we had roofing, we had galvanized, we had steel, I mean, on and on and on. I'll bet you our list of subconsulting contracting firms was over, you know, And somebody had to coordinate. That stuff had to arrive at the site in a truck, be unloaded, be lifted up on the scaffold, right? That was this construction management, and Nagan Construction, who was the general contractor and handled it for us, did it pretty much with aplomb. But boy, there were lots of Saturdays and Sundays we were out there. So I think that's always difficult with a building this complex. You must admit, that is not a simple tower. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'm right here. I have a question. I'm a dentist, and you really piqued my interest, when you started to talk about the mortar and construction methods. And I wondered, given new materials like this, which have extraordinary resistance to torquing forces and condensing forces and shearing forces, do you think as you've replaced many of these places that were so vulnerable that you, and this is probably a naive question, you may have inadvertently distributed stresses to those parts of the building that are not as uniquely put together?
Well, I don't understand the question.
No, I was just saying that the materials that you use to restore it, yes. And just it's a naive question in a way. The produces stresses in another spot in the building. As
let me say this much: when the National Register was created. Oh, I'm sorry. When the National Register was created, it was the technology of that period of time in the 40s and 50s and 60s to use as much original fabric as was in the building as possible, number one. Number two, if you couldn't because it was damaged or gone or whatever, you used a similar material, frequently stone from the same quarry. You've heard those stories, right? And you tried to match the original material as much as you could. But with modern technology and modern chemistry and modern mortars and the new terracottas and the new precast concretes, those new stuff, the new things are much better made structurally and waterproofing than they were in 40, 50 years ago. So that's the only reason we use the plastic thing. That man, when we walked in the room with the plastic thing, I thought we were going to get stoned to death. The people that, how dare you put a plastic roof on the Bronx? But, after we put up panels and they tested it, and they threw a bucket against the slate roof and saw what happened. I think we're going to see that happen as technology moves forward, sir. And I think my metaphor for dental was simply a metaphor. It was just saying dentists have been repairing teeth for a long, long time, rather than taking the attitude, pull it out, take it out, pull the lintel, you know what I mean? And so I just found that to be funny, and in being in meetings like this with several dentists as yourself in the audience, they frequently laugh at my jokes about that. So, I think we're on the right path. I just think that we are seeing a confluence of technology and architecture and building that's really good. And I hope my goal in doing this for the General Society is they're generally good at combining these things. And what I want to do, and I'm standing here, this is the rollout lecture for this. This has never been presented publicly before. And I want to offer this to the General Society as a philosophy, a way to be, because the General Society built many of these buildings. They certainly did that one. And now they're restoring what they built 100 years ago. And they're going to restore it in another 100, So this is a cycle. And I appreciate your question very much. Yes, ma'am. Who else? Yes.
I have to wait for the mic.
You have to make the mic. My apologies with microphone difficulty.
I just wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about the condition of the interior under this now exquisite and fully up-to-date exterior. What kind of condition are classrooms, workshops, whatever is inside
Well,
there?
I will. The building was restored and modernized when it was purchased by the city and given to the Job Corps Training Center. And in that day, when you modernized an old cranky building like this, you made the interior modern. You dropped the ceiling, you put ductwork above it, right? You put in fluorescent light. You did, you did what you did in the 80s and 90s. And so the interior, much of it, except the grand stair and a few other places, look in that way. The outside, however, was so strong. What do you do with, you don't tear this off. Everybody that tried was called insane, and the Landmarks Commission was in existence by that point, and they just jumped all over. You understand, what happened is you get to the inside-outside thing, and that's precisely what happened. My dream is that someday the interior of that building will have its drop ceilings taken down. We'll have wallpaper put back on the walls. Maybe Bradbury and Bradbury, who knows? Christopher Dresser, I don't know. And restore the interior of the building to feel like the exterior of the building, because I've done that to another building. I was going to show it to you, but I might in a later talk. But the point is, students walk in a building on the inside that looks Christopher Dresser, having walked by that on the way out, and it makes the kid see himself differently. He realizes, this is my culture. This is what my country stands for aesthetically. And now that's my own personal opinion. I hope that, you're shaking your head, I hope that pleases you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes.
Last question.
Thank you, David. Really appreciated that. To give homage to mechanics and tradesmen, could you tell us the name of the masonry restoration company, the tradesmen involved in this work?
I can't tell you the tradesman's name. The name of the company is Cathedral Stone.
Cathedral Stone did the work itself or provided the materials?
Cathedral Stone is the name of the company that did the work.
Did the masonry work?
It's a corporation. It has offices in New York. It has big offices in New York. It has, it's doing Woolworth and it's doing Chrysler, and you know what I mean.
Thank you.
It's a big deal.
Thank you.
And they have very important work. It also was involved, I am told, now I hired them on the phone and on the internet, so I just remembered them when I was in graduate school working on St. John the Divine and being impressed with the fact that they weren't ripping out columns and ripping out domes, and you know what I mean?
Very good.
They were being conservative, and so that impressed, a 30-year-old kid and as trying to be a preservationist and working with James Marston Fitch, and so, that's where I came by that.
Cathedral Stone.
That's the name of the company.
Thank you.
And if you like, we can go to the government and find the names of a number of other companies.
But my final question, as a follow-up, because it is mechanics and tradesmen, was there one mechanic who stood out, whose work just was beyond the others, a true mechanic? Would you know the name of that person that did that work, that mason? From Cathedral Stone? From Cathedral Stone, was there one workman? Thank you.
Did the exterior. I would say the mechanical contractor who squeezed 5 boilers that are this wide and that high and 15 feet long and weigh 1.5 tons through a 3-0 door without taking the limestone off. It's pretty good, right? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
David, thank you. Thank you so much. And
I hope this was good.
Hey,
I
wait,
didn't run over.
David, you were so on
I
the
did
button.
not run
You were
over.
you were so on the button as regards time and your presentation. It was fascinating, and I just want to thank you. It was so thoughtful of you to take a different perspective of the tradesmen and the crafts that gone into the building. I think we all have to say, because it was an immense project, and you and your collaborators have done an absolutely terrific job. So thank you so much.
You're most
Yeah.
gracious.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, right. And we want to thank you for sharing your expertise this evening. And we'd like to make a presentation to you now.
You would?
Yes,
Wow,
we
okay.
would. And to do so is Victoria Dengel, our Executive Director.
How do you do, Madam Executive Director?
And David, thank you. And you know, at your passion for what you and true love for your work and for the project is so inspiring and so wonderful to see. So thank you for sharing that with us as well, but also for your focus on mechanics and tradesmen. I often think where would we be without them? No one's vision would be accomplished, and it's our plumbing, it's our electricity, it's stonemasons, it's all of the people that work so hard. And I grew up the daughter of a local 14 operating engineer, so I saw a lot from an early age, and it really changes your life and gives you an appreciation for what we have is because of what the mechanics and tradesmen build for us. So it's a great gift. And so thank you for shedding light on that as well. And so on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, founded 1785, we express our gratitude to David F. Gibson, Principal, DF Gibson Architects, for the restoration of a Bronx landmark, for his participation in the General Society Artisan Lecture Series. So thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So,
That's good, because they are the people who do this.
yeah, I know.
We don't
No.
we don't know how to do this.
Right.
We draw it.
Yes.
But look, it's there.
I know. It's
And that's
art.
amazing.
It's art. It's the
And
building
that's
arts.
what the General Society
Yes.
does.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll keep doing for another 233 years.
I'm
but
sure you
David,
will.
because we don't want to lose track of you, so we've made you a lifetime member of our library.
Oh my gosh, I'll be
Okay.
I'll be here. I'd
All right.
love to get involved. I will.
Thank you. And just one other thing, but on a lighter note, I have to ask you this. I can't get the thing about this soap out of my head. Do you have a favorite brand?
Yeah. What is it? What is the soap? The fluffy one. When you buy soap,
Oh,
what? Ivory.
okay.
Yes. Boxes of ivory.
Okay. I knew it. I knew it.
Soap is oil and light. You know what
Ivory
soap
soap. I'm going to hit the facade.
is? Soap for hundreds of
Right.
years.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Ivory soap. It's
All right.
American.
Okay. Yes.
We
no-
buy American.
99 and 94%
Thank you so
pure.
much,
Right.
lady.
All right. Thank you, David.
And-
And to our audience, too.
And David, we would just like to have a little memento of the
Oh,
evening.
wow, yes.